Hello, this is Harvinder Jabbal from BITS Pilani, Object-Oriented Analysis and Design. Today, we are going to discuss visibility of objects, classes, packages. We are going to have three submodules, one to discuss visibility, another to discuss classes, and the third to discuss packages. What is visibility amongst objects? You see a diagram out here which gives an indication of what a UML class diagram looks like. You have seen many of these diagrams, you may have read them, and you would notice that a UML class diagram shows you visibility, shows you parameters, and it shows you compartments. Now, any of these elements are optional, they are not necessary. Visibility for one is definitely optional. However, many a user would like to state the visibility very clearly and would like to make it very clear with respect to each attribute and method as to whether the behavior or the attribute is visible publicly, privately, within a package, or in a somewhat protected manner. What do we mean by visibility? We know that in object-oriented design, objects speak to each other. One object has to send a message to another. Needless to say, a sender can only send a message to an object which is visible to the sender. When it is visible, it probably has a pointer to that object, or in some way is able to reference it. So this whole concept of visibility is as to who a particular component is going to be visible to the public, or is it going to be just privately? And we have to understand what we mean by publicly and privately. UML is the language of choice, and we have discussed UML in the previous modules. It has got a syntax, and the syntax starts with visibility. Normally, to avoid confusion, and particularly considering that there's a difference in implementation between various programming languages, it is safest to manage with the plus and the minus. Plus stands for public, which means available to everybody. Minus means private, which means visible only within the class. If you are sitting within the class, you can view this particular component. Maybe a method, maybe an attribute. It's only visible internally. We call it private. Public is something visible from outside. Now, though the idea is fairly simple, only a public attribute or a method can be used by other classes. When I say other classes, I'm talking about methods in other classes. Obviously, anything used by an object is actually used by a method in that object. So, when we talk about other classes accessing an attribute or a method, just remember that generally we do not like attributes to be public, and we like only those methods to be public which we want publicly accessible. We normally pass information about attributes through accessor methods which allow other objects to invoke methods within our class and pick up values of an attribute and pass them out. Private elements are obviously secrets kept by an object. And object's own methods would be able to access it. It would keep a record. and it would pass it on to other classes as and when necessary. Now, the fact is that various languages have got their own rules. C++ would behave differently. C# or Java would be having their own methods of handling. And in particular, there would be confusions as to how the other two types of visibility would be handled. And that is why my suggestion is, when you write UMLs as a designer and you know that your classes could be subject to multiple interpretation, avoid getting into the other two at an early stage. You put a visibility indicator, knowing fully well that there is a language dependence involved, and then there will be no problem. Now, we get to packages when we know a little more about packages, and a little later in this series of lectures, we'll be understanding packages. And when we talk about package visibility, we really talk about as to whether a particular attribute or a method will be visible to classes outside the current package or not. And then we have protected, and protected is a language defined attribute as to what is the extent to which it will be available. The interpretation varies. When you're looking at a UML model which has been delivered to you from outside, which means it's not been done by your team, where your mutual understanding is very clear, you need to be wary about it, and please understand the interpretation of the team which developed the UML or the language which they've been working in before interpreting it. Again, be aware that things differ with languages. I've mentioned these tips while speaking, and I've suggested that you should try to get away with pluses and minuses. If you use package and protected visibility, it would be best to specify the language you are referring to or what you intend to get through with it. With this, you would be able to understand visibility, and we'll continue in the remaining modules. Textbooks are available to you. Please read them to supplement the knowledge garnered during this session. Thank you.